Help Save Our World Speak number 49, Religions. Hello and welcome to our 49th Help Save Our World Speak online speakers meeting, where we are changing the conversation to change the world. I am Denis, the teacher of this quest for the truth, change and transformation. Let's start with introductions. Kurt, can you please introduce yourself?
I can do that, yes. Kurt, I'm at the moment in the middle of the Everglades, driving from east to west, observing a lot of the, I guess, the damage of the recent semi-hurricane that passed through and the high water levels, and just remembering how fragile our ecology is. So happy to be here talking about that. That's
awesome. I've crossed that I-75 or whatever so many times. It's don't fall asleep on the journey. That's the problem. It's so straight, so flat.
That's correct. Yep.
Yeah. All right. So Alex, could you please introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Alex. I'm here in South Africa and trying to change the conversation so I can change the world.
Excellent. Brendan?
Hi, I'm Brendan. Sorry, I'm just checking my mic is on. Hi, I'm Brendan. I'm 25. I'm from South Africa. I'm just here to help change people's minds and views on how they look at the world.
Thank you so much, Brendan. So let's begin. Now, religions are a very contentious subject, and it's not my aim to upset anybody. It's not my aim to create any more divides and dissent and hatred and any of those things. All I want to do is look at the religions through and the way people have lived and thought throughout history. So let me just begin with just sort of giving us some context. On my quest for the truth, I moved from the state of the world to change my own self and my own life, to changing my thoughts that influence my choices and my behaviors in my life. Then I moved on to the unconscious and the subconscious and the universal conscious mind, because we live in a conscious universe. And then, of course, how to change that. I went through different techniques on how to become aware of your thoughts and your emotions and so on, and then how to change that. Then I had an epiphany that there was major factors affecting what we think and how we behave, which seemed to be beyond our everyday control. A hidden secret thought conditioning. So I began at what institutions of thought controls there are that affect and infect our minds, creating us domesticated, patriotic, subservient to power, and a system that was not serving us, the people, and nature. I began looking at education, which we have just been going through. I looked at media, I looked at governments, I looked at businesses and corporations and banking, and still had no idea where the fundamental values and beliefs of the way we thought and the way we live in our world. So that became our big question, my big question. What thought control systems resulted in the choices we made and the lives we were living? Unnatural lives, harming ourselves, harming others, harming nature, living as wage slaves for an unsustainable, heartless, taking business, technological, monetary, religious society. It just made no sense. With this in mind, I researched many different power-based systems in search of what it was. What made them what they were? Throughout this process, I discovered and confirmed that underlying all gangs and institutions and religions are value and belief systems, pillars of thought, and a power structure that serve their specific purposes, their structure or vision. So I began searching many, many different forms of institutionalized thought. Although I was raised by a mother who was a Catholic, I could not understand why adults lied to us. Father Christmas, Easter bunnies, and a God in the sky. So I questioned religions. And at the very young age of 67 years old, I rejected it. I can remember sitting in the Sunday school room, listening to the preacher, and I turned to my friend and I said, "Hey, Johnny, I don't believe what he's saying." And he, like, in shock, "Oh, you believe what he's saying." Anyway, we were sitting outside afterwards, and the priest starts walking by, and Johnny jumps up very merrily and says, "Please, sir, Denis doesn't believe in God." And I, like, "Oh my gosh, you didn't just say that." So the priest turns around to me and he's like, "You got to believe in God. What, you have to." And he's going off at me. And I said, "Okay, please, sir, let's not get upset. If this whole God thing is true, then could you please ask him to talk to me the next time you speak to him?" And of course he couldn't. He got extremely ruddy-faced and angry with me and stormed off. So that to me confirmed that there was no such thing. Then what happened to me, I was about 12 years old, and my mother was a Catholic, because she was originally, I think, of the Church of England or Protestant, and she forced us to go to church every Sunday. So on this one Sunday when I was 12 years old, I said, "Mom, I'm never going to church again. I don't care if you punish me. I don't see why I should suffer kneeling on those wooden planks, listening to a man that I just don't believe, talking a lot of nonsense." So, and then I also went on to say, and looking down at the beautiful oceans with these 6-foot glossy waves, I was like, "And do you think if there is a God and he is a creator of everything and he created those beautiful waves, don't you think you would prefer me to be surfing than kneeling on that plank and hurting my knees?" Anyway, so I ended up in boarding school because of that. Living in South Africa, I could see what was happening in our apartheid government and the Christian national education system. And I knew the ruling Afrikaner Party took their lead from the Nederduitse Gereformeerde Kerk, which is the post-Dutch Reformed Church, which advocated segregation, which is the word apartheid. So this led me to look closely at many different religions. Starting with Buddhism, reading many books, I realized that there were many different branches to Buddhism, and they all originated from the original Buddha, which was Siddhartha Gautama, and with his quest to alleviate suffering through meditation. Then I read a lot of Hinduism, the Bhagavad Gita, and found it very interesting. Although there are many teachings in many different religions that are really good for people and their society and everything, there are certain things like the caste system, which basically suppresses the poor, which I refuse to accept. Reading the Quran, I realized the similarities in the origins of the teachings of Moses in the Quran, as well as in the Bible, and which were also in the Torah. And I began seeing these similarities. I also read other books by theologists, many other books, on religious power and systems of power. Then while I was doing yoga, I read the yamas and niyamas and a whole lot of other various religious teachings. What I learned through my thought journeys was many ancient natural religions were connected to the living natural world, humans living as one and in relationship with nature, naturally seeing that they were living beings, living as one with the natural, living, spiritual, or energy world was their natural choice. Of course, they did not know the words like energy and spiritual back then. They had their own words for that. And yet they knew the vibrating, cyclical, seasonal patterns and living nature of the world around them, because they lived in that natural world as one with it. They knew they were composed of the air they breathed and the water they drank and the plants and the animals they ate, which came from the earth and the fire of the sun. They knew without the sun nothing would grow and they would die. Theirs was a time of humanity, natural knowledge, intuition, conscious connectedness, awareness, and natural wisdom. A time of intimate relationships with one another, plants, animals, and the natural world. A time where living in love, balance, and harmony was critical. It was a time of remembering. They had these, like you can see it in a lot of the more indigenous cultures in South Africa. They have this incredible memory and this incredible ability to speak multiple different languages. And then, of course, they valued storytelling, singing, moving, dancing, whistling, playing, and living. It was a time of midwives and herbalism and shamanism, wizards and druids in England. These belief systems were referred to as natural religions. In these tribes, there was usually reverence and respect for elders, for ancestors, and for new life and nature, knowing that without the functioning whole and living in love, balance, and harmony together, they were less and possibly wouldn't survive. They accepted the responsibility to their ancestors who had made it possible for them to live their lives, and the lives that came before them that made life easier by making sure there was enough for 7 generations into the future, and then realizing their responsibility only to take what they need and to constantly give back and to provide for future generations. So not only was this intimate relationship, there was a realization and a knowing of who they were in the chain of life. They also held good health, fitness, strength, agility, and other human talents in high regard. They would nurture and protect one another in times of need. And you find that in the Zulu culture here, it's called Abantu. When one person has food and others don't, they share. And when one person is ill, they look after them. They only took what they needed and were constantly moving on, living mainly as gatherers in the beginning. And eventually that changed to hunter-gatherers and then to herders and onto different forms of natural religions. Then something changed. Some people began to change their relationship with nature and others. They took a different fork in the road of life. This happened when some saw that there was nothing stopping them from taking whatever they wanted. They could benefit in the short term at the expense of others, using fear, intimidation, violence, force, wars, slash and burn, plunder to take it all. Then intimidate and enslave others with domestication of animals and agricultural methods. Things changed. That different path or in their road of life happened with a change in their values and beliefs and their way of life. The era of selfishness, egotism resulted in great suffering and continues to do so even today. The taking, plundering, wars for more and more ownership, control, and power, it's become the way of our Western world and other areas of the world. What they did not realize then, at that moment of that change, that they were just delaying paying the papa, only to realize when he was gone, he could no longer be paid. It's such an important thing to understand. In the natural world, there has to be a maintenance of balance and a giving and receiving, and only taking what you need and nurturing and growing. But if you just get in there and take and take and take, there is an end to that. This historically seems to have begun with the development of agrarian societies, agriculture, slash and burn, tribal clashes, private property ownership, labor, domestication of animals, and herding. This ownership principle and attribution of value to things resulted in bartering, trading, security, gangs, kingdoms, believing they had the right to own and benefit from the profits of the land at the expense of all others and nature. Historically, these developed into these main categories: production, labor, technology, security, and mind control systems. Production, of course, was in the beginning farmers, and then it moved on masonry and metalwork and so on, and that became technology. Labor started with farm hands, and then it progressed to more and more advanced forms of labor in our society. Technology also I've got as blacksmiths and so on developing into the scientists. Security was the protectors of the grain, which became private security forces, which ultimately became kings and queens and governments and empires. Then, of course, the mind control systems began with just being religions. But then, of course, that developed into many, many other different things, just schools and businesses and so on, and many different things that have been used throughout history, like media. And to pay for all of this was, of course, taxes. Now, in the old days, they paid with animals and with grain or whatever it was that they had available in actual resources. But then, of course, that was converted into money and became paying taxes in the monetary system. This excessive wealth, which was accumulated by the few, developed into power-based systems and pyramid schemes, all happening at the expense of humanity, life, and nature. The progression was from individual human prowess, energy, and power to family, which was considered really important, extended families, to the tribe, which was bigger groups of families. Most stopped there because it was sustainable. Ancestrally, and for many tribes throughout modern history, they have tried to sustain natural ways of living their lives. And we all ancestrally came from this group of sustainable, natural living people at some time in history, before something happened to us to force us off the land and change our way of life. And more often than not, that was wars and colonialism and all sorts of devastating systems of force that were used, like the Roman Empire spreading across the pagan territories and taking away their land and so on. You can see how empires have done that throughout history, spreading their belief system. Let's have a simplified, generalized look at the history of the development of power and religions. Now, before I go there, does anyone want to say something? Alex?
No, other than I thought we were doing physics and science today, but you can carry on.
Okay. I have an enormous amount on education, and I can't really do that because it's too much. It's like a course within itself. Then I looked at this, and it's such an important thing for us to deal with that I felt like I'd be letting myself down and letting us all down if I didn't face this head on. But then I also decided that doing it in the most kind way I could without creating any religious hatred and all that sort of nonsense, which we don't need. We need to come together as humanity, was of primary importance. But we have to look at this because this really is the most important thing that was like the beginnings of where we ended up in terms of thought. If we don't face it and look at it, we're letting ourselves down, because really, when it comes down to it, this is the most important thing that we could look at. We can go on to everything else, but this is the crux of the matter, as far as I'm concerned. What do you think, Kurt?
Yeah, I fully agree with you. We have to know what got us here in order to clean that away from the path in front of us. So yeah, having some idea of history is extremely important. I think you laid it out pretty well.
Thank you. So I'm just going to, there's a few more sort of like structural things that I'm going to be laying out and so on. So it's like, you'll see the big picture when I get to the end. I said, let's have a simplified, generalized look at the historical development of power in religions, where we are vibrating, living, growing energy beings, human beings. We live in and are patterns of vibrations of a connected, vibrating, energy giving and receiving, conscious, living energy world and universe. The next thing is humanism and naturalism. The primary level as humans can be seen as the personal energy power of every individual. Then living as one with life, all right, as an ecosystem, living as happy, healthy, strong humans, as one with all life and the biodiverse ecosystems around them. That is another level of power, and which empowers people as expressions and part of the greater whole. So that's the ultimate state for me. The next level of power could be seen in our relationships as a collective power of families, tribes, and ecosystems. There is also a wonderful level of being and sustainable. Then the magnetic matriarchal power of love and family and tribal systems, and the power is in nature, love, life, planting, nurturing, and growing into abundance, and living in love, balance, and harmony as one with Mother Nature. That's also an essential way of being. Then Dreamtime, the ancient Aborigines belief system, living in the spiritual dream world life, living their lives in that state. It's absolutely wonderful. Then shamanism, the belief in the spirit world that lives in all of nature. The shaman were highly respected spiritual guides for their knowledge and wisdom. Then animism, the attribution of a living, and I don't like the word soul here, but soul, this is from a dictionary definition from Oxford Dictionary, the attribution of a living soul to plants, or instead of soul, life to plants, inanimate objects and natural phenomena. The belief in a supernatural power that originates and animates the material universe. Now, this is really interesting. Everything is made of vibrations. Albert Einstein, he's saying exactly the same thing as these ancient religions. It's like, oh my gosh, everything is vibrating and spiraling and moving, and that's exactly what the people who lived and believed in animism and shamanism and so on, and even the Aborigines and all of these ancient tribes believed in. So science is, because of its objective materialism, has limited its ability to see the world really as it is by their language and values and beliefs. There's a bit of science for you, Alex. There's a lot of influence, wealth, and power amassed by herders domesticating animals, which is a common form of natural living currency used by African tribes, with paying lobola for their daughters and so on. You have to pay with cattle and so on, and livestock. An interesting factoid is African tribes refer to very powerful leaders as gods. As in Zulu, the language that I speak some of, they use the title Inkosi, which means God. And of course, it also means very powerful leader. Then you have patriarchal power-based systems, masculine energy, usually use fear and dominance to get their own way, and quite often are very destructive. Then we have polytheism. First of all, theism meaning belief in God, poly meaning many, many gods. The dispersion of power, the belief in multiple leaders on earth, represented by many gods in the sky. Now, an example of that would be Hinduism, which has and had and still does have many, many, many deities. Then you have ancient Egypt, where they are sort of throughout the history, there's over like 2,000 names of gods in ancient Egypt. And many of the gods had human bodies and bird or animal heads to show who that specific god was. And the one that I was looking at was Basset, was the goddess of protection, of joy, love, pleasure, and pregnant woman, believe it or not. Now, you can see like an interesting relationship there between nature and the step towards gods, which is like an interesting transition. Then we have ancient Greece, which is also a polytheistic society. And most ancient Greeks recognized the 12 major Olympian gods, which is Zeus and Poseidon and Athena and so on, Aphrodites and Apollo and all of those. Then we have monotheism, one God, representing one man's absolute authoritarian centralization of power. In the previous polytheistic systems, there are multiple heads of power, whereas in a monotheistic system, there's just one. The religions that were based on the first 5 books of Moses was called the Torah, and the Old Testament are based on this monotheism and, of course, a pyramid scheme. This includes Judaism, Hellenic Judaism, Islam, Catholicism, Protestantism, and all of the Christian religions, and many, many more that were influenced by this system. Thinking back in history to the many different pyramids that were built over a very long period of time, and the Egyptian pharaohs built bigger and better pyramids as symbols of their power, dominance, and success. Nothing has had a greater effect on the slave psyche than the expression of dominance and power in extreme masonry feats, writing, huge temples, monuments, lavish clothing, gold and jewelry, then linking their status and power as rulers to the ethereal powers of gods in the sky. They seemed, I'm sure, to the average slave, invincible. My mind's eye flashes back to Egyptian civilization, the deterioration of pyramids and the desertifications of the once jungle region with heavy rainfall, which we can actually see from the erosion of the Sphinx. Then my mind flashes back to the stone heads of Easter Island and the extinct population. What breaks my heart is the result of all of these superhuman efforts throughout history was ultimately total devastation of the ecosystems, desertification, and social collapse. Imagine if we put that same effort into creating a living utopia on Earth. Humanity living with one purpose, to create a happy, healthy, and sustainable future. Imagine the world we would live in. Okay, I'm going to stop here and give everyone else a chance to talk. Alex, what do you think?
Yeah. Ask me a question or leave me till last.
I said, what do you think? Okay. Kurt is still driving?
No, actually, I stopped. So I'm good.
Okay. Well, you're welcome to speak. Do you have any ideas, thoughts?
Well, having also studied world religions and philosophy. I can track along well with you as far as the development and the misappropriation of power and reality and knowledge that has come through. I guess I'll call it the religio-political juggernauts of societies over the eons. And, you know, we can see we're in it right now. So as much as we are an advanced civilization, it's obvious how much damage we're doing. And it's obvious how much damage those monolithic power structures have been in determining the flow of civilization and continue to be. So we still get to create a world that lives in harmony with nature rather than just using it as a resource. Of course, same thing with human beings. We are not human resources. We are human beings, and human beings that get to use the resources consciously and sustainably.
That's an interesting point. The religio-political. It's actually something I didn't bring in, but it's a brilliant idea. It's many, actually, believe it or not, the religions throughout history in many situations actually were the controllers of the people to be able to put the kings and queens and everything in power. What did they call it when they put a king or queen into power? Ordained. They ordained the kings and queens under their religion. So, and in many situations, government and religion were not separate. Well, I mean, looking at Moses in particular and that ancient religion, there was no separation between church and state, you know, as it developed, you know. So that was really an interesting concept. I love that.
Yeah, and the Roman Catholic.
There you go. Karen, speak about that.
No, I'm good.
All right. So yeah, I mean, with the Romans, it was Emperor Constantine in about 300 AD that took basically the ancient Torah and the Jewish religion, basically, and he took the Christian religion, and with their scribes, they combined them together to create one book called the Holy Bible. And that Holy Bible then was their ability to control the pagans and the Jews, who were like very powerful forces within their whole sort of empire that they were expanding out. So to control all those people, they literally manipulated that and created a new religion called Roman Catholicism. But then what they did is they took that whole concept and they spread it across their whole empire. And of course, we know the effects of that. And of course, their empire collapsed as well because of exactly the same thing, the same principles. They don't work. So fascinating. Anything else anyone wants to say? So after reading many religious texts, a pattern started to emerge. Many unnatural and unsustainable religions began with the Torah and the first 5 books of Moses. I was reading a book titled The Jewish Bible. Now, of course, there isn't a Jewish Bible, but this book was titled that, where one theologist said that, I can't remember his name, and I can't find the book, so I can't help you there, said that no other book, that Exodus, he was referring to Exodus, that no other writing had a bigger impact on the Western world than Exodus. And it's fascinating. That's where Moses constructs his pyramid scheme. It's just, I can go into the details of that, but I think I've said it before, but maybe for another time. As you should know by now, I had also spent most of my reading life looking for the truth and wisdom behind the stories, the ideas behind many different subjects, and studied encyclopedias and the purpose and the nature of different subjects in school and in university, always looking for the ideas behind the sciences, always looking for the essence, the purpose, the values and beliefs, and the cause of them being as they were. On evaluating the King James's version of the Bible, it became clear to me that the beginnings of the Old Testament was the pyramid scheme designed by Moses, who was raised as the son of the Pharaoh's daughter. He was raised on pyramid schemes, how to create them, how to maintain them, how to grow them, and how to rule over them. Then he decided to grow his own. So the fundamental design and purpose of the religions that developed from that basis was a pyramid scheme. It's like whether you're a Christian or you smoke weed and you're what are those guys called in the Bahamas with the long curly hair and they believe in Jesus? Well, it doesn't matter what religion you belong to. All right. If it comes from the Bible, the Rastas, and they're such loving and kind people and everything, but they believe in the Bible. And of course, unfortunately, that is based on a pyramid scheme. And so I'm not here to harm people in any way. You know, it's like there's so many people that religions have been their relationships and their friendships and everything to them. And harming them is absolutely not what I want to do. I just want to show them that this fundamental premise has been a very destructive force, and it's leading them to live lives that is destroying our world. The tree of religions that followed, that branched out from the Torah, is really interesting. It developed into many different religions in this tree of religions that grew out of the belief system and were mainly spread by religious institutions, empires, and missionaries way back then. In 300 AD, I spoke of Emperor Constantine and his scribes combined Christianity and Judaism to create the Holy Bible and Roman Catholicism, which spread around the world by the Holy Roman Empire. And the wars and oh my gosh, the horrendous stuff they did in the name of their God was just absolutely insane. And it really was all about the accumulation of wealth and power. It has been spread in many different ways by many empires since then. I think of colonialism in Africa and the British Empire doing exactly the same thing. And later, the spread became more insidious as it became the founding values and beliefs of many different institutions of power. So yes, it was the values and beliefs of the churches, but it was the values and beliefs of the bankers, the governments, the education systems, the businesses, corporations, the media. In every way, we have been pushed along this journey with all of these institutionalized systems, which have taken on a life of their own. And people can live and die, but the institution moves on, carrying this disease of the mind, this thought disease, this thought plague, which is killing our world. We live on a limited planet with many of these continuous growth pyramid schemes, just plundering and taking, and the war machines and the corporations like needing more goods and services and chopping down jungles and just plundering the world, all for the centralization of power. This has to end badly. So this is how humanity has become the most destructive force on our planet. It's not human nature, as it has been inferred. It is how we have institutionalized raising our children to think and live in the world. We need to rethink and return to responsible ways of thinking and living happy, healthy, and sustainable lives in love, balance, and harmony with nature and our world. I just want to point out here that people who lived in giving and receiving tribes, who allowed nature to recover, live, and grow into abundance, lived as one with it, only taking what they needed and constantly giving back. They ensured their future until it was ultimately taken from them. Most ancient civilizations living in taking and plundering systems had a party with everything they could until it was all used up and dead. Then their way of life collapsed. We're doing that on a worldwide level. Our current societies are no different. They too will collapse as nature collapses, and as people are driven harder and harder into poverty and slavery. Civilizations are uncivilized and unsustainable, and the religions that make them possible are the underlying causes of what is said to be the human condition. It is only by changing our religions, our values and beliefs, dispersion of power, moving out back onto the lands, regrowing what we are destroying, empowering nature and humanity to be the change the world needs now, that we will survive and thrive. And that's the reason for what we're doing. The bottom line is we have to pay the piper. We either pay now or later. We have to grow biodiverse ecosystems and reestablish or re-green and re-wild our planet and reestablishes the balances of nature and life, or we will not survive. The only thing that will survive is our stone monuments to the stupidity with which we lived our lives. I will discuss religions in more depth if you want or interested, but everyone's now welcome to just go wild. And I know that was a bit long, but I think it was necessary. Good. What do you think?
I usually think good things. So earlier on, you had mentioned, I think it was about Einstein. I think it was everything is frequency or vibrations. I don't remember, or energy. I don't remember exactly which noun it was that you used. I'm sorry?
Vibrations.
It was vibrations, right. And so, the common concept, at least with a lot of people I speak to, speaks to that. We're only vibrations, we're only frequencies, and frequencies manifest as different things depending on their cycles, as you know. And as you were ending, you were talking about our need to get back into what makes sense for us to survive, and it just kind of brought everything we talked today into all of these different aspects of religions and socio-political formations, and whatever we're talking about, they're all really vibration centers, energy centers that have been created by people for various reasons. And we live in a world of constant competing frequencies. We don't live in a monotone with anything in our life. So how we move into the future and how long a cycle it will be until we can refresh the earth, get back to some type of sustainability and connectivity with earth. A lot of that depends on what these other frequencies and frequency sources are putting out as well. And we are all not naive that there are competing forces to take over, influence, or control the world. Do they all come from one source? Possibly. And maybe that's, what we get to experience over eons and eons as beings, is how all of these various forces and cycles and frequencies find a commonality, a harmony, a frequency that they can then create that maybe is without destruction and is without hate and without overuse of resources, all the things that we talk about in what would be an ideal world. So as human beings, or as a small team of human beings, which we are on these calls, it's up to us to realize that we can choose to impact the world in the way we think would be best, acknowledging that our view of the world and the cosmos and history and time is pretty infinitesimal. So we get to just remember that everything that we do and everything that we speak and everything that we want to accomplish is a a drop and a ripple that creates larger frequencies that go out that may or may not have an effect. I think the value of consciousness and being a human being is that we still choose to do it because we believe in it, because we've looked at it, because it ticks enough of the boxes that say, this is what I need to do as a person in order to feel I've contributed to the small lifetime I have in the grand scheme of things. So as we go about helping save our world, that's really what we're doing. We're helping. It's not that we may or may not do it. We're helping. And I think that's the important point, is for us to always pay attention to, is that no matter what we do, every moment of our lives and our aware lives is an opportunity for us to help along the direction that we've agreed is important for us. So we are our own little religion and power source and influencers and whatever else that we are on the planet. It still gets to come down to, am I making that difference in front of me and inside of me right now? And that's why I join these calls again. It's because they're an opportunity, like many other people go to church, or they go to weekly AA meetings, whatever it is that they do, to reinforce to them what's important in their life. And as a small group of committed citizens, this is maybe the only way we can change the world. And why not give it a shot? Because from what our experience is, it's a lot better than the alternatives we've experienced, both in history books, and in our lifetimes. So.
Wow. So cool. So cool. You just make it sound so easy.
Absolutely. Nicely said. Well done.
Yeah. Alex?
Now, this area of conversation, I'm not, schooled in well enough to, dig deep or, channel any thought processes. So, I just generally bow out of these conversations. But yeah, no, absolutely. Like Kurt said, at the end of the day, it's our choice to help. And, we can look at we are looking at all the items in the past and mistakes that we've made that have led us down this path and gotten us to this point, so that when we actually get to the point of we're making good decisions, we're on a path in the right direction. We don't make the same mistakes over and over again. And that's basically the fundamental reason why we're actually tackling these subjects, is because, we don't want to make the same mistakes going into the future. And if we are making those mistakes now, we can really look at them and make better decisions, better choices, and go forward from here.
That's awesome stuff. Brendan?
I think Kurt and Alex pretty much covered it all. Yeah, I don't really have anything more to add to that.
All right. As long as you're present and listening, it's all good. All right. So what I loved about what Kurt had to say was you brought it, that energy thing, Einstein, everything is vibrations. You brought it back to that. And I think, the one thing that I sort of stood out in my whole life is that we come into this world as conscious energy that manifests into physical beings. And we travel our whole way through our life. And ultimately, we get to the end of our lives. And the only thing we take with us, not our physical bodies, not the things we've accumulated or anything, we just take our energy tone, that consciousness which we have become. So is not the greatest, other than, of course, caring for everyone else and looking after everyone else and trying to spread that energy tone, is not that energy tone the most important thing that we should be focusing on? And and spreading it to the people of the world. Because, if we live in a hate-based world where everyone is like, oh, I've got to kill and plunder and take and whatever, just so that it's me, 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 me. And then they get to the end of the lives and like, oh, what have you achieved? You're leaving all that stuff behind. So you just killed a lot of people, spread a lot of hate, and now everyone's got bad energy. Or could it be that your whole purpose is to become that amazing energy, which will move on as consciousness into space and become maybe consciousness that spreads around the universe as better consciousness, as just more loving, compassionate consciousness. And then also sharing that or leaving that in the hearts and minds of the people who remain behind. I think there's a lot to that, which deserves a lot of study, I think. So what do you think? Anybody else? That looks cool, Brendan. I like your background.
Yeah, I thought I would come outside into the little slight drizzle that we're having at the moment, just to get some fresh air.
Just, if you don't mind, do you mind standing up and turning around and giving us the sound? You can hear that's a la-di-da. We call them hardy-das, la-di-das. It's a big black bird that looks like a stork or whatever, but it's got like a trumpet has a voice. So there's amazing birds and frogs, and it's beautiful out there.
Oh, well,
as we're talking about nature and seeing nature, and I think all four of us really appreciate being in nature, which is another bonding aspect of who we are. Just to appreciate the simple things like the call of the la-di-da. There you go. Thank you for right on cue. Yeah, just to appreciate that there are other entities in our space that are going about their existence as best they can as well. And yes, I agree. And for the most part, and for the most part, their only concern about immortality is to reproduce, right? Is to stay alive and reproduce. And that's pretty much what animals are about for the most part. I think mammals are a slight distinction from that. And certainly human beings and whatever our unique makeup is, has us have conversations and thoughts about all of this. But ultimately it comes down to that, what are we living if we're talking about 7 generations into the future? That's a type of immortality, isn't it? Where we're talking about not only affecting here and now, but contributing to the value of generations, 7 ahead of us. So when we start to think about that, we start to think about our immortality. And it may not be our physical body. Actually, I agree, it probably isn't. And we won't take one nanoparticle once we die from this earth. It's not what we came with, and we just accumulated all of this over however many years we've been alive, right? We're just an accumulation of stuff. And we don't take it when we go. But what we do leave are the kindnesses, the goodnesses, the thoughtfulness, the concern, the love, the appreciation, and the forethought that we as generations can give to people in the future and say, this may not have been like this if it weren't for what we did. And I'm not saying that as honor or congratulations. It's just that's what we get to leave without any proof or validation that it will be that way come 7 generations from now. So again, it comes down to how we choose every moment of our lives to contribute, to appreciate, to connect with, and to be aware of really what we are, which is a small fraction of an energy piece that gets to affect other people and things while we're here.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Kurt, I just want to show you something quick, if you don't mind, Dennis.
Yeah, go on.
You said you also love plants and stuff. Well, these are some tomato plants that we planted about a week and a half ago as seeds.
Mm-hmm.
And they're already sprouting. I don't know if you can see them properly.
I can see them, yep.
Yeah.
They're looking pretty good.
And then there's some microgreens over there.
Uh-huh. Are we all still connected?
I'm connected.
I'm here. I'm here. It seems Brendan's having an issue with his.
Yeah, he got knocked out.
There it is, yeah.
Okay, can I just yeah, what he was showing you there was tomatoes and microgreens on the one side. So we're going to transplant those along our fence down below there. And so yeah, he's showing you the actual, that's kale there and various other plants that we planted to and parsley and cabbages and so on. So
Parsley, lettuces,
the
strawberry.
lettuces there. Yeah, all sorts of amazing stuff. And we've been eating that kale quite a lot. Well, I have been anyway. We put it, you know, when we have a lot, we put it in our meals, but otherwise I just eat just randomly during the day. So, so it's pretty cool. Yeah, carry on. You were going to say, Kurt?
No, I'm just going to mention about nature and appreciation. Again, I don't have the ability to grow stuff on the property I'm at. I did this spring. I got those grow bags. But I do appreciate the properties that many of my friends have. And just yesterday, I went to visit a friend I hadn't seen in many months. And he's got a wonderful front porch that looks over an extremely lush garden in the front of his house. And as I drive up the street, I see nothing but lawns and houses. And driving up the 2 or 3 blocks on his road, yeah, there's nothing but houses with little lawns and stark nothing. And as you get close to his house, this whole green, lush jungle appears. And it's only about maybe 30 or 40 feet to the sidewalk. And the property is probably only 30 to 40 feet wide. So it's not a very big space, but it just shows up as such a living entity in the middle of all of this starkness. It's just, you know, it's sad to see that that's what exists in Hollywood. Let's strip it all away and, you know, make it regimented rather than allow the, you know, the flora and the fauna to grow.
Well, you know, that's interesting that you bring it up. I actually was staying just north of downtown central sort of Los Olos, you know, in that area there. And first of all, I went looking for a place to stay, and I drove from property to property that were letting, and they were all, like you say, just like no life or whatever. Then I found some old guy, just there's a shopping center, and just behind them, he owns a whole lot of properties, and he's just let everything grow. But the number of times that he's been taken to court with, you know, them giving him citations, and how hard he has to fight to be able to keep living systems growing around him. And the horrendous stories I've heard about, oh, no, you're not allowed to grow this tree on this sidewalk and this and that, whatever. Oh, my gosh. It's a nightmare living in those cities because of the regulations, you know, that make it almost impossible for you to do anything. But then, of course, actually, Oregon is a very, very interesting place in that people are very open-minded and very sort of tend towards looking after nature more than anywhere else that I've been in America. And some woman there like went to university and they studied agriculture, and then they didn't have their own land. So what they did is they got together with, first of all, they made flyers and they sent out to everybody in the area saying that we would create gardens on your property for X amount of money, and then we'd make sure that you got a food basket throughout the growing season. And bam, they created their own little greenhouse at home, and they went out. People would pay for the soil and for the irrigation and everything, and they would create these beds, and then they had more carrots here and more greens from there. They put it all together in baskets, and they go and drop them off at these different people's houses once a week.
Dennis, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to interrupt you. I got a couple of calls in from somebody that I need to meet right after this, so I'm going to have to take them because I think they're going to be leaving soon. But thanks for a good session, guys. Thanks.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize the time.
Bye.
That's okay. All right.
All right. Take it easy. Have a good one.
All right. Thank you.
Cheers. Alex, are we just going to call it an end to it?
Yeah, I think so.
All right.
Sounds good.
Let's second.
See you
All
now.
right. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.